Yes, Mr. Mayor.
I'm John Ross, and the question is directed to Michael Sutton. I tell it's coming, Michael. I would like you to share with particularly the 2010 class and others here, what were the drivers that caused you? I was privileged to be associated with you in Lafayette, and the drivers that caused you every Tuesday night to come together around a small church that barely owned one footprint and catch the vision that's now $50 million in investment. Talk about that.
Well, for me personally, first of all, I've led a blessed life in that I have had some opportunities that maybe other folks have not had, and I was frustrated from the standpoint of you had mentioned that things, or how much have things changed in the last 10, 20 years. Things did not seem to change, and what I found was that there was a lot of what I call defense, but there was no offense, and I felt that I could help kind of determine what that offensive package would be. I mean, in a lot of ways, we were like, you know, the people that like football, like the Baltimore Ravens, when they had that great defense and no offense. So I felt that one thing we needed to stop doing was stop complaining about things and do something about it. So what we did, we just quietly did our thing and hope other people would kind of see what we were doing and first of all try to help us, but also try to replicate it in other areas. The other thing that was happening is that at the time, downtown was starting to grow. And in the spirit of full disclosure, I sit on the Downtown Partnership Board, okay? Also sit on the Arts Council. So I was engaged as to what some of the things were happening. So I knew that this city was in a position where it was ready to grow. So what we did was we just put our own plan together, and frankly, we had help from people like the Millennium Fund, okay, that helped us to do some of the things that we wanted to do. And what I found was that once you kind of show people you were willing to help yourself and you had a plan, people would help you. And so that was the driving force for us. Not wait for someone to tell us how to fix our community. What we wanted to do is go out and fix our own community, and by that example, other people would follow us and also help us get there. And by the way, thank you, John. John actually served on our board for a couple of years, and so he was very influential as far as helping us with that direction.
So we are winding down to the end of our panel discussion. If you've got a burning question, you can run to the mic now. In the meantime, I'm going to ask our panelists to be thinking about a closing question. And if you can build on Karen's statement of the assets in our community, that would be great. If there's something that gives you pause, that would be appropriate. But ultimately, it's up to you, and I'd like for you to start thinking about it. Deborah?
One of the questions I have, and it surfaces for me today because of reading the story in the newspaper recently about a young woman who was not going to be able to go to community college because she was an illegal immigrant. Her younger siblings were born here, and they'll get to go to school and college. She can't go right now because the rules don't permit that. Yet she was a fine graduate of her school. I also see to Karen's point about helping everybody rise and finding a place for everybody at the table. Immigration is a huge issue that doesn't get enough attention in our city, I think. And I think a lot of the poverty issues, a lot of access issues, a lot of need for free clinics and things like that, and crisis control ministry is all wrapped up in that issue. So in this beautiful community in the future in 10 years, do you see those issues as resolved, or what steps could we take through the steps on the way through those 10 years to make the community not have that as a burning issue?
All right, whosoever shall.
Well, you know, there are policy issues around the access of government-funded organizations, and that has to be worked through some policy and through the legislature. And certainly everybody should exercise their right as an individual to let their city council person know, their legislator know, their senator, their congressperson know how they feel about that and how they want their state to be represented. In the case of kind of the social services system here in Forsyth County, that's a question that doesn't get asked. Citizenship is not a prerequisite to receiving services from most of the social service agencies that exist here. I do not see that changing. They are there to serve people. and they, normally most of them, including us at the Cape Fear Reynolds Charitable Trust, talk about we're to serve the residents of Forsyth County who find themselves in financial need. I do not see that philosophy changing in the nonprofit sector. So we're just going to keep serving people who need help, hoping that we can also help get them to a point where they no longer need the services. But we're not, as individuals, we're involved in those debates. As citizens, we're involved in those debates. But as institutions, we're staying out of that, continuing to do the work that we have our mission to accomplish.
All right. Question?
Yes, my name is Latasha, and your response touched on the question in some ways. I'm a native to Winston-Salem, born here, educated here, and I continue to live here. And I can say that I've seen change happen in the city to a great deal, but I haven't seen change happen in the areas that need change the most. And my question is, how do we bring change to those areas without making them mirror images of communities that we consider to be established? A lot of the change that we bring in is designed to change the values of the community and not just address the needs of the community. So how can we bring change and still allow a community to remain true to the social values of the people that live there?
Are you thinking of, can you name some specific areas?
I think of a lot of the traditional Black communities where we take away some of the values that those communities once had, let's say in the 70s. And we're trying to make them mirror images or reflective of communities that we seem to value more so, or that we seem to qualify them as the better communities. So we're not improving the communities, but we're trying to change them to be reflective of communities that are perceived to be better or higher in standards. So I think a lot of times those communities lose their values. They lose some of the traditions in those communities that make them unique, and there's still values in those communities that make us good people.
Okay. I could ask some more follow-up questions, but is anybody prepared to answer the question?
I think that's the power of neighborhood associations. The neighborhood associations that are thoughtful and think about what common unity, what their community holds together, are very, very important. And the kind of democratic process associated with neighborhood associations, the organization that takes place for that, the intentionality of it, I think is the starting point for thinking through that. If we don't do that, it ends up being just washed over what's happening all around you. So organizing neighborhoods so that you really are clear about that, you're thinking about that, in my opinion, is the starting point for specific areas or communities.
I would
In
have,
fact, Michael, that's what y'all did.
yeah,
You
you
just sat
exactly
down
right.
and said, who is Goler, what are we going to be, and how are we going to define ourselves here? You just didn't stand up on a blackboard and write it down. Everybody got together, right, and worked through that.
You're exactly right, and I think a part of it too is changing the housing patterns. Goal now, once again, our goal was multi-income, multi-generational, multi-ethnic. What we have now is we have an apartment building for seniors, for elderly people, okay, that have hardly any income, right next to a building that some people would call a luxury building, where people are paying upwards of $1,600 a month. You have the elderly building next door, people are paying $20 a month. Okay? So what you're doing is that you're putting different people together, and yeah, you're changing it, but you're actually improving it. The other thing I think that happens a lot of times is that when we talk about affordable housing, okay, affordable housing tends to be clustered in certain parts of the city, okay? When you speak of East Winston, I think East Winston needs more unaffordable housing, if there's such thing. Because that's how you get the other incomes to live in the area. But once again, if you all have all your affordable housing in one part of town, once again, that is a recipe for disaster. So now when we're putting affordable housing over on Martin Luther King, we need to put somewhere in the western side of town. Because once again, I think as people live around other people, I think they have an opportunity to see that their possibilities are a lot more than what they're living around now. So once again, I think you're changing it, but I think you're changing it for the best. And when you talk about housing patterns, now you're talking about schools. Okay, because once again, you find that your lower performing schools are going to be in the lower income neighborhoods. So I think the key is changing the housing patterns so that people have an incentive to live in parts of town where they traditionally wouldn't even look at.